Hey guys, it's Abby. I am back with another video, and today I will be doing a book review on Thanks for the Trouble by Tommy Wallace. Now before I get into the book review, I just want to apologize for either the lack of videos in the next couple weeks, or maybe I'll pull it together, but also just the lack of me reading this month. I don't know if I've even finished a book so far. I've been kind of in a slump. I've had a lot going on. Not only am I in the midst of finals, but I've had a lot of personal stuff going on. It's just been crazy, and I haven't even had time to film, so the last couple videos have been super pre-filmed, way in advance. So I just have been slacking on my booktube-ness, and so I just want to apologize in advance, just in case it gets a little bumpy from here on out, but who knows, maybe it'll be completely okay, and yeah, don't worry about it, guys. I got this. I got asked to do a book review of Thanks for the Trouble, and this book is relatively new. Tommy Wallace also did the book We All Looked Up, which I read last year, and I really enjoyed. I loved the cover, I loved the story and the characters, and it was really well done. And so I saw this one in Target, and I had no idea that he had a new book out, so I immediately picked it up, mostly because the cover is stunning, and I think I mentioned this in my haul for it, but it's just so beautiful. Basically, this story follows a boy named Parker Sante, and he is mute. He has been mute since he was, I think, 12, 13, 14, early teens. And after him and his dad got into an accident, and ever since his father passed away, he has been mute and not spoken. He did speech therapy for a little bit, but he ended up quitting, and so he hasn't spoken. He writes things down, or he uses sign language. And I think it's just really interesting to have a character who physically does not speak. And you can tell the way that Tommy Wallace wrote this character that's very beautifully depicted, because the writing that the boy does, because this whole book is technically a college essay that he is sending in to apply to some sort of college, and you can tell that his writing is very, very advanced because that is what he does 24/7, because he physically doesn't speak. So it follows Parker Sante, and he likes to go into hotels and other public places and steal from people, which makes him sound like a horrible person, but he's not. It's just some weird thing he does because he's a little messed up. So he's in a hotel, chilling, looks kind of like this, and he sees a girl who looks very strange and young to be hanging out at a hotel, eating dinner by herself. She was just very strange, and so he starts writing a story about her, because that's what he does. He likes to write stories, and he writes this elaborate story about her, and he ends up stealing money from her. Then he leaves, and he realizes that's pretty messed up, because she had a huge wad of hundreds. And he's like, okay, I'm going to give it back, and she realizes he took it, and they start to form this friendship together. And she is not what she seems. I don't know what's a spoiler and what's not, which is why I am skeptical on what to talk about in this book, because I don't know whether you should go into this blind, because although this does sound like a contemporary love story, which it is a contemporary, but there's a borderline magical realism aspect to it that I don't know if you're supposed to know about, because it doesn't address it on the flap. Girl's name is Zelda, and she appears to be the same age as Parker, but she seems to have a little more years under her belt, if you know what I mean. The way she presents herself and the way she speaks, she seems a lot older than she actually appears. So Parker gets really attached to this girl. They spend tons of time together, and she tells him that she's going to spend all of the money that she has, which is probably thousands and thousands of dollars in cash, and jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he is determined to not let her jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, and the only way she said that she will do that is that if he helps her spend all of the money and if he applies to college, because he wasn't planning on it, and she really, for some reason, was adamant on him applying to college. So they make this agreement, and they spend a lot of time together, have a little love fest, that kind of thing. Very sweet love story. Zelda was annoying me a little bit. I felt like her character was slightly irritating and pretentious, and I believe that that's the point. By the time I got to the end, I understood why she was the way she was, and it all started to make sense, but I feel like her character definitely developed as the story went along. You learned so much more about her. She was so mysterious. I loved Parker's voice the whole book. He has a very distinct voice, which is funny because he physically doesn't have a voice, and you just learn so much about him from the things that he writes. And I loved the way that this was formatted, because it is written as a college essay, and each chapter is a different title and about what it's about, and they're just it's basically goes by scenes, and it talks a little bit about Parker, and you learn more about his life and his father and his mother and his history. And I thought it was really, really beautifully written. Tommy Wallace is a very lyrical writer. He is a musician and a songwriter, so it makes sense that his writing would come off that way. And I really, really appreciated it. I loved the length. It is a very short book, but it didn't need to be long. I felt like it ended perfectly where it needed to be. I think I gave it 3.5 or 4 stars because it wasn't like the best book I've ever read in my life, but it was so well written, very interesting and different story, a fun contemporary, but like definitely handled a lot of heavier issues. You talk a lot about death and life and what it means to be a person and what happens after you die, and just these really complex subjects, but discussed so vividly through teenagers. And I thought that the way that this book portrayed teenagers was really well done. I think a lot of times YA messes up on the whole teenager thing, and they think that teenagers are one way or the other, and they're just not. And I felt like the teenagers in this book were really well depicted. Also, this takes place in San Francisco, which is my favorite city in the entire world, and I just find it so fun to read books that take place there because I absolutely love it and I miss it, and I just want to go back and visit again. And so I thought that was really interesting. And it follows these kids who are extremely independent, which technically isn't normal for kids to just be wandering the city alone. But I thought, other than that, it was really, really realistic. And okay, I'm going to mention what the whole magical realism aspect is. And if you don't want to know because you kind of want to go into this blind and you're just excited to read it, don't just stop here and don't listen to this, and I'll tell you when to skip ahead. I'll put like the numbers on the screen. But if you are interested and still skeptical because you're not a contemporary person and think this is just your average contemporary, then I will say it now. So basically, Zelda claims that she is, God knows how, like 300 years old, and that she doesn't age. And it reminded me a lot of The Age of Adeline, if you've seen that movie, which is a really, really good movie. But the woman in that movie, played by Blake Lively, doesn't age. She stopped at like 20-something, and so she always looks younger, and she's been alive for centuries and centuries. And Zelda claims to have that same condition or issue where she doesn't age, and she's looked like a teenager, like 18 for her entire life. And you kind of get that vibe from the way she speaks and the way she doesn't understand certain lingo or certain things. And the reason she wants to die, she's done. She's done with the life that she's lived. And you kind of uncover other things about why she particularly wants to leave. I think those are definitely spoilers, and you should read about them because she does have a complex history. But that is why she kind of has this urge to get out, because she's been alive for so long. And you kind of follow Parker along the way where you're like, okay, this girl's cray, like she's lying. And at first I was like, okay, she's making this shit up because she's pretentious and, you know, wants to be special, that kind of special flower girl, like hippy dippy, that kind of thing. And that's why she kind of annoyed me at first, because I didn't believe her. And so you kind of go along with Parker as he slowly starts to believe her, and he kind of tracks it. It's like, okay, maybe I'm believing her like 30% more now. And obviously as he's falling in love with her and he desperately wants to save her, and you kind of go along with that story. And I thought that was really, really interesting, an interesting aspect, because you do, like, what would you want to live forever? And you kind of have to ask yourself that question when reading this book, because they ask that question a lot within the pages. And I thought that was a really interesting aspect. It covered a way heavier topic, and I really enjoyed it. And the only issue that I had with Tommy Wallace's last book, we all looked up, was the way that it ended extremely open and you didn't really know what happened, which is typically what happens in contemporary, so that's kind of normal. But this one wrapped up so nicely, and I loved it, and I loved the way that it ended. And I felt really attached to Parker. You get really attached to him, and you think that he's your friend, you know, and you start to root for him towards the end, because at first you're like, okay, kid, you need to get your life together. You were like 17 years old. You need to go to college. You need to figure yourself out. You need to learn how to speak again. And, you know, you kind of are a little rough on him at first, and then you kind of, you know, warm up to him, and kind of the way that Zelda does. And he did romanticize her a lot, but I think that was the point, is that this boy is romanticizing this girl, and that's not good. So I kind of like that. It's a very unconventional, I wouldn't call it a love story, but just story about coming of age, and the way that Parker is dealing with his dad's death, and his muteness, and his mom struggling with alcoholism. And I thought it was lighthearted and really funny for the amount of heavy issues that it covered. I don't know, I really do appreciate Tommy's Wallace's writing. I want him to write more. I'm really glad he came out with another book, and he's definitely working his way up into one of my favorites. He was a great debut author last year, and he is definitely working his way into the writer community, which I really like. And I've actually listened to some of his music, which I also really enjoy. And the reason that I was slightly skeptical about the whole magical realism aspect of this is that I couldn't tell if I was supposed to believe her or not. In the whole book, you really don't know. And I guess that's kind of interesting and fun because you can get a million different takes on it. Like, some people might think, yes, she was telling the truth, and some people might be like, no, she was just being dramatic, and it was part of her mental illness. And, you know, it could go a million different ways, but I don't know. I still don't know how I really sit with it, and that's kind of why I enjoyed it so much, is because when it's a book that you wait a little while and you think about and you're still trying to figure it out, and it's like a puzzle, and I think that's really interesting and fun. So I definitely do recommend this book if you're looking for a short, interesting, contemporary to kind of read in between like big fantasy books, because that's kind of what I did. So I was on this like fantasy kick, and I was like, okay, I need to take a break, and this was really good, sweet love story, and I really enjoyed it, so I suggest reading it. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I haven't done a review in a while, and I'm trying to get back into the habit of doing them because I know that I really enjoy watching reviews and I want other people to be able to watch reviews. I hope you guys enjoyed.